Do not adjust your TV sets. Wrestling Chat with Friends is back tonight. Of course we are. We are home. Can I say that now? I'm EJ the Collector. Welcome back to Wrestling Chat with Friends. We've been gone a few weeks, but it's good to get the gang back together again. We've got my podcast mentor, the producer of the show, Cheats Two Belts is here. Cheats, what's up?
What is good? And we are home. We are home. And, I've changed. I've changed since the last time we were here. So,
A rare Tuesday appearance for GG. We're happy to have you. Our friend Kelsey's out on assignment tonight. She'll be checking in the next upcoming weeks. She's got a lot going on, but I'm happy to really announce that my tag team partner, the Chad Gable to my Otis, the Julius to my Brutus, a little Creed Brothers reference there. TG, who's not a hypocrite, as you can see, he's back on the scene. TG, welcome back. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing great. I never change.
Nope.
It's just a straight line from here to the grave.
Well, I'd like to say that there are a lot of topics we can cover tonight, but we're here because the whole wrestling world is talking about the goings on from this weekend, and we're going to dive right into it. CM Punk, probably the most polarizing figure in wrestling over the last 10, 15 years, but also one of the greatest wrestlers, greatest stickmen in the last 25 years, had an unceremonious exit from AEW at the end of the summer. His reports of his demise have been greatly exaggerated because, to the astonishment of all of us, he returned on Saturday at Survivor Series. We were talking on a group text that night. Both Tom and I emphatically wrote, kind of midway, I guess right before the War Games match, he's not coming back. You replied with, he's definitely not coming back. If anyone out there follows dirt sheets and online sheets, it was sort of like wishy-washy. No one really knew what was going on. The reports were like, WWE talked to him, sort of. They said they didn't need him, but you never know, which is sort of typical for all that. So let's just kind of jump right into it because I know that we all have strong opinions about it. And I believe some of our opinions probably differ quite a bit. So either one of you can go first. I'm going to defer to Cheats because I definitely want to hear his take. Cheats, what do you make of all this? And kind of like, A, are you surprised? B, is it a good idea? And C, what do you think for the future? Those are sort of the three big questions.
yeah, no, I was completely surprised. I was shocked that he did it in the WWE did it. I don't know where I was more shocked. That's the interest. I don't know if I was more shocked. I guess I do know. I was shocked on the WWE side. I am not shocked at all that now CM Punk wants to be back in the mainstream of things. Like the 7-year hiatus he took, breaking away from wrestling prior to returning to AEW, I think he had a different impression of the industry, a different impression of his life or whatever. When he got the itch and that itch was fulfilled with admiration in AEW, I think now it's all bets are off. This whole I'm just gonna go back into isolation, if you will, and just have a happy life like I did for the 7 years that he was away from wrestling. That is no longer the case.
He went out on his terms 9 years ago. He did not seemingly go out on his terms this year.
I'm telling you, and everybody that knows wrestling and knows what wrestlers enjoy, they will tell you to their dying breath, it's the crowd, it's the feeling, it's the energy. That's the thing that can never be replaced. And he was away from it, whether it's his terms, yes, indeed, but he was away from it. But when he came back and he got that itch again, that pop, he got that reception, no matter what he did. I don't think there's any kind of putting the genie back in the bottle, if you will. So I'm not surprised that he wanted to find that somewhere again. And WWE at this point is the only option that would be able to kind of produce at the level that he's used to
on that scale for sure.
So I'm not surprised that he wanted to come back. I am surprised that Triple H worked it out. And apparently, based off of what we heard, Nick Khan was the guy that really had to sign off on it. And then basically everybody else didn't know. So I'm surprised that he's back. I don't know what this means. Some of those reports that we're talking about says it's definitely a multi-year deal. He's kind of back in the fold. Is it good for business? Instantly, the instant reaction is it's extremely good for business.
Clearly,
it is the biggest story in wrestling. It's a quad, like if it wasn't for the Eagles and the Bills playing in overtime, it could be one of the biggest stories in sports. Universally, that's kind of got that crossover appeal. It's a huge thing in what we kind of do, right? And so long term is the real question. How long does this story play with him, flying straight, being a good citizen, before the wheels come off and he realizes that he is who he is, they are who they are, whatever. I don't know the answer to that, but it's extremely good business for now. I'm extremely surprised on the WWE side, and let's buckle up and see where it goes.
TG, before I let you take the reins off you and let you go, I'll say this too. The way it was presented on Saturday with the trademark graphic in the bottom right-hand corner, and they're pulling back to go to the show, that it was obviously a surprise to me too. And I thought his appearance Saturday, 71 million downloads or views on WWE's across WWE's platform, which set the record. Quick check in case you don't know. Do you know what record he beat for most views on any WWE social media platform? Either one of you?
Logan Paul.
The Rock coming.
Close, Tom.
Logan Paul.
Logan Paul's dive onto the table was it Roman? Was it Seth? Which one was it?
I think it was Roman.
Yeah, that handheld camera dive. That was something like 41 million views in 24 hours. This gets 71 million views. And for me, I think something like that Triple H could see would be the result of it. I think that right there is the reason you try to get Punk back into the fold. Did WWE need to add Punk because of sagging anything? No. WWE is hitting on all cylinders with their house shows, with their TV. Their TV deal seems to be way further ahead than clearly AEW's are. So, it's a win-win, to Cheats' point, if Punk stays on the straight and narrow. And I think the most telling part of this whole saga is something Triple H said Saturday at the press conference, where he said, I'm a different person than I was 9 years ago. Phil's a different person than he was 9 years ago. And most importantly, the company is different than it was 9 years ago. If you're the same person with the same attitudes that you had 9 years ago, you're doing something wrong. I couldn't agree more with those statements. And I think that's the reason a lot of that brings you to what we have today. Tom, talk about the return first, and then I'll let you kick off our discussion about the promo last night on Raw.
The wholesale swallowing of propaganda here is really pretty impressive. The idea that CM Punk he's not the same person he was 9 years ago. How about 9 months ago when he was making a mess of AEW? He's a different person now. Here's the thing. WWE with or without CM Punk, not really that much difference in terms of their business. I mean, it'll help. It'll certainly short term, it'll help. But it helps WWE a lot less than it hurts AEW. Because what's going to happen now is they're going to take CM Punk, who the guy at Warner Discovery loves him, and they are going to take Raw. And their number one goal now is to try to use CM Punk as an asset to get a deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. In international markets, there are a lot of markets where Warner Brothers affiliated, networks already carry WWE programming, like the UK. WWE, for years, as standard practice in their TV deals, has had as part of that they have to be the exclusive wrestling program on whatever station is carrying them. So they are going to try to use this to squeeze AEW off of.
That's interesting, because that would be a full acknowledgement that they are competition and that a lot of their business is sort of trying to drive their competition out of business. And that would be the first really acknowledgement that AEW, and I don't quite see it that way, but keep going.
Yeah. I think that So I don't think CM Punk is. I don't think he's back in WWE because he's addicted to crowds. I think he's addicted to punishing those he is perceived as wronging him. And his one and only feud, whatever's happening on TV, immaterial. His one and only feud is AEW. That's who he's feuding with. And that is everything that he's doing now is because of that. And that is why he and Triple H and Nick Khan are in alignment. Because Triple H is the guy who fired him on his wedding day. He is the guy that he hates, or at least hated, Triple H, and Triple H did not get along with him creatively. And all of a sudden that has been put to one side because he's like, okay, we have a common enemy now. I hate those jerks. And here's the most interesting thing to me about how this is all going to play out. I don't know what CM Punk legally is able to say.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit in the group chat. There is a scenario where he has signed an NDA for either better back-end compensation upon being terminated or just to avoid potential legal issues or whatever. And if that's the case, all of this is going to have to be done very, I guess, indirectly. And it may not even manifest on TV. He may just be playing a character on TV who never references AEW because he can't, which I think is fine. I think that's fine. In terms of the TV character he's going to portray, I think that the direction that I would take it would be the promo that he cut Monday night, I think was unremarkable and very generic. But I think that what's an interesting direction to go would be to become a heel who is in fact this giant sellout hypocrite. I think that there's plenty of money to be made there and plenty of interesting story development to be done. And I don't know if CM Punk will allow himself to play that kind of character. I think CM Punk has an innate desire to be perceived as very real and authentic. And I don't know how excited he'll be or invested he'll be in portraying that kind of character. But to me, that's the most interesting character that he could portray at this point. I mean, the dude, he has made, and I'm not saying he's completely unjustified in this, but he has made many, many, many disparaging comments about WWE over the past decade. And not all of that stuff simply disappeared or is attached to Vince McMahon specifically. A lot of it is attached to Triple H. A lot of it is attached to the way they still do business. And so for him to go back there, for him to potentially work a Saudi show or like that kind of stuff, it's kind of a hard sell to be like, oh, I'm still, I'm the voice of the voiceless, and now the voiceless have a voice, and blah blah blah. It's like, come on, dude, lean into being the guy who is like, look, I just like money. I just like, like to Cheatham's point, I just like being in front of crowds. I'm a mark for myself, and I am going to do whatever I have to do and be whoever I have to be to get access to those things that I love. If he did that, I'd be like, okay, I like this. This is an
interesting points you've made, Tom. First, out of everyone's, if you're paying attention to Twitter, X, the feeds have been inundated with CM Punk takes. That's all you really see now. The one take I really hadn't seen made is what you kind of said, that the basis for a lot of this decisioning was to stick it to AEW and try to put them out of business. Cheech, you may be the better one on this. Like, the final deals, NXT is going to go to CW, but no real final decision's been made. I've heard that Warner Brothers is in the mix, but by all accounts, Warner Brothers is happy with AEW, but they haven't re-upped their deal yet. I'm just really fascinated that you think this is primarily maybe less about solidifying, getting the best talent, raising house shows, who knows how many house shows he might end up doing, or just increasing merch sales, which, CM Punk right now is the top t-shirt seller in WWE, and he's still the biggest merch seller in AEW for 2023. So
those are nice positives, but I don't think they're the driving force. I think they are ancillary benefits to what they're trying to do. I think the primary, I don't think they don't need him creatively. I mean, I'm not saying he's not going to be an interesting character or create interesting new storylines. I think that he'd be the best opponent for Roman at Royal Rumble. because he's the one guy who's credible and hasn't lost a room in the last 3 years. But I think that the reason that Nick Khan especially was very keen to get him on board was because he knew that he would be a major asset when they are trying to figure out where Raw is going to go. And if they can use that as a move to block another option for AEW, I mean, that could really, really compromise them. Quick thought, and then I'll shut up. But one thing that's really interesting, 6 months, 8 months ago, when we were talking about AEW, I had said, I felt like by this fall into going into winter, the AEW could be in the strongest business position it had ever been in. And things just, I mean, they had a couple of good, obviously, great things. The Wembley show was a big deal and all that. But the loss of a couple of key pieces of talent, the way that CM Punk exited, sort of the creating a new show, and now it's like, does it make sense without the kind of a brand split scenario? And now you have QT Marshall, who's resigning because he feels like the company is going in some new direction that he can't be a part of or whatever. I just think that if this domino falls in place where WWE gets some kind of exclusive deal that boxes out AEW from one of their potential primary landing spots, I mean, they have a lot of money behind them, but I just wonder where they will be a year from now.
What's inevitably going to happen, and what has kind of already been happening, is people are pulling out receipts that Punk has made disparaging remarks about WWE in the last year, and they're showing that. And your handle right there, non-hypocrite. If you have not paid attention to anything other than WWE in the last 9 years, his return and his promo last night was amazing. He's home. He's missed everybody. This is the place he knows he should be at. That literally is like ignoring. I'm a big Punk fan, but even I couldn't help my eyes from almost rolling out of the back of my head when he was delivering some of those lines. In a little bit of retrospect, I was like, well, what is he going to say? Like, I don't think this is necessary. I don't think a script was handed to him, but clearly, that's what you say if you are trying to get yourself back into the WWE fold. Coming out with a nice crisp WWE t-shirt. I mean, that is the WWE way. Punk clearly is ready for that. And the more I'm thinking about it, maybe this is the first step in an ultimate FU to AEW. These guys are
I think there's parts of that. I think Tom has probably his underlying motivation correct, but there's also a big part of this. And the guy's just a narcissist, like egomaniac type of person.
He's a mark
that wants
himself.
To be the center of attention, and he can't do that in New Japan. He can't do that in Ring of Honor. He can't do that in Impact, who apparently threw a whole bunch of money at him to show up over there. And this is the way that, again, 7 years is a long time.
If you're not a mark for yourself in wrestling, what are you doing there?
I understand, but 7 years is a long time. And what I mean by that is when he made his first return in Chicago at AEW on Rampage, I believe it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
That had the world going crazy when he actually did.
Yep.
There was I think a difference in him in regards to this industry and to what he wants now at this stage of his life, which is I really think he wants to be that guy again. And obviously he burned every bridge that he could burn over at AEW twice. And
some of those bridges were set fire for him that he ended up torching them. But yeah, okay.
I agree. The other thing is I will say this, and this will be a really big factor, I think, in how long he kind of rides the straight and narrow in WWE before he eventually will flame out. But there is AEW. He got there and really instantly thought he was the biggest guy on the block, no matter what
he was.
I get it, but I'm talking about the level of respect that he had. He could probably count on less than one hand other professional wrestlers in the AEW locker room that he actually said, I respect that individual. Like maybe a Bryan Danielson, maybe a Sting, you know what I mean? Possibly a Kenny Omega, maybe before some of this stuff happened. But the rest of these guys, he had absolutely no respect for. And I think that changes things. Because my question is, if he gets over the WWE now, looks around in that locker room, there's going to be a lot of new faces. Great. It's been a decade, right? But if he has a little more respect, I think, not just for Triple H and Tony Khan, but like the boys in the back, if you will, and whoever the sheriff is, I don't know who that person is now because, as we've all talked about, Roman is like not there. Like Roman's not the locker room leader of WWE because he's not in the locker room, right? So I think that will be an interesting kind of dynamic because really quick, because I feel like he can't come in with the same attitude that he had originally with AEW, but I hope, and I don't know who it is or who it would be, who has seniority, tenure, like Randy Orton just came back, but I don't know if there's got to have some people that can kind of keep him in line. And if there is people that he respects, he'll stay. He might make it, 8 months before he loses his shit. It's going to happen.
My question is it just possible that the company has evolved to the point where there doesn't need to be a wrestler's court. There doesn't need to be there's lots of guys who collectively help run that locker room. There isn't an Undertaker anymore. There doesn't have to be because everyone's more focused. No, you don't think so?
I think wrestling's wrestling, man. I think the boys in the back are the boys in the back. I think management's management. I think you have a healthy respect for management, but even I think the boys in the back there's got to be a handful of guys. And the good thing about WWE is it's WWE. So they've got a handful of guys. I just don't know who they are, and I don't know if CM Punk respects them. AEW has boys in the back. Just Punk didn't give a shit. Like, he didn't care.
Well,
he was going to do, and he had no respect for Tony Khan, obviously. So,
and I would just add to that. I agree with Mark, and the way that I look at it is kind of from this perspective, even putting aside sort of the internal politics of the locker room and so on. When CM Punk went to AEW, he was legitimately, and I think probably unquestionably, instantly their biggest star. I mean, nobody. There are other people, with all due respect to the John Moxleys and so on,
Danielson might have been
upper star. Bryan Danielson, I think would be the other guy who you could make the argument for at the time. But there wasn't a ton of competition in terms of who's the biggest star that they have.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now he goes to WWE, and there is a scenario where he goes with the attitude of like, look, I understand this is a different landscape, but if he doesn't grasp that, like if he comes in, I don't even mean like with a bad attitude, not even putting a negative connotation on it, but just saying like, okay, I was the top star in AEW, and now I am a co-equal with anybody that WWE has. I think that's where you are going to run into some potential frustrations, either for him creatively or with, the company with what they do with him. Because I think I said this in the group chat, but I'm like, this is a company where they have really, really worked hard to, for example, establish Cody Rhodes as like he is their number one babyface, period, the end. Then you've got Seth Rollins, who they really have worked hard to, really make the belt that he carries credible, make him a fighting champion, have him go over in a series of feuds defending that belt. The point of all this being that from an objective standpoint, CM Punk, no question, dramatic increase in sort of casual interest. I'm sure they hope that he's going to increase the number of lapsed fans or casual fans who watch the product again. But in terms of how they book him creatively, it seems to me that in a company where a guy like John Cena, who admittedly is a part-timer, he's not signing a multi-year deal like Punk and is going to be around as much as Punk, but where John Cena, who is probably on their Mount Rushmore in modern WWE history from their perspective as a company, if he's coming back to put over guys like Austin Theory and Solo Sikoa, it seems unlikely that Punk is going to be a guy that they're going to position to be, a long-term world champion again or something like that. and I don't know where Punk's head is on it. I'm just saying he may already be like, yeah, absolutely, I'm on that page. We're on the same page. Like, that's possible. The thing that would concern me would be like the mindset that he had in his last year at AEW carrying over to WWE. And again, that may be not the case at all, but that's what I'll be interested to see is if how they use him and if he gets frustrated or whatever.
Let's talk about sort of the locker room and the people in the, you know, three of us know nothing about how people truly feel about him in the back, but, you know, we all just kind of rely on things we've seen, heard. Seth Rollins had a really great work reaction to Punk Saturday night. He was being held back. He was dropping F-bombs. It looked really real, you know, but I think we all kind of know. I want to talk about if this was, I don't believe Triple H when he says him, Nick, maybe someone from Endeavor knew about this. That might have been the case 10 days ago when discussions were being finalized. That might have been this case, but leading up to that match, I believe some of those competitors, Cody probably, there's no way Seth didn't know that was happening before he goes out there because Seth's needed to react a certain way to build a storyline. So, you know, I think, you know, what I heard was Triple H actually got on the headset in the minutes ending the show. He was the one because he had to make the right call to when to hit the music and everything, which means he had direct access to Michael Cole's head. Now, Michael Cole didn't react when they came, and kudos to WWE for no longer giving the could it be? What is it? They were quiet. They let it marinate. And there's video of Cole actually reacting. He reacted as if he knew it was happening. So I just would ask both of you, who do you think knew, and who do you think maybe if they truly feel that locker room is in a position where you didn't necessarily need Punk, where do they fall on, you know, getting their big stars, the guys who have been there for 10 years, your Seths, your maybe not Drew, but your anybody else who you think maybe conceivably could have a problem with it. Seth, I guess, is first and foremost. Do you think, did they not feel like they needed to let him know? I think Seth is sort of one of your signature stars. And because you want to build these stories for down the road, they have to have, I just don't believe that nobody knew because it's needed sometimes for character development and storyline. So to each of you, what are your thoughts on like how maybe people like Seth truly feel? Do you think he feels like he could have voiced it to anybody? As best as we can, what do you think about the backstage reaction now and going forward to Punk's return from the locker room? Tom?
I think that there were definitely people in the main event who knew, and definitely people in the main event who did not know. And I based that on the fact that we talked about this a little bit in the group chat, but the Punk's return was so sort of separated out from everything else that was happening. Like the main event ends, celebration of the ring, cut to a wide shot, music hits. It's just Punk in the crowd, You don't see anything that's happening back in the ring. So the point of that is, I think that I would feel confident that Cody knew, maybe that Seth knew, but I don't think that Seth's reaction is necessarily a guarantee that he knew. I think a lot of those guys, like us, they had heard rumors. They obviously all talk. So I think they may have been ready for the possibility, but hadn't been pulled aside and told. Now, to your point, one of the things that has kind of leaked out or sort of been talked about in the days after Survivor Series was, without anybody specifically being named, that there is concern now that because Triple H didn't have those conversations ahead of time, that some folks who may, like, nobody's freaking out, but that maybe some of the trust that he had worked so hard to build with some of those folks has eroded a little bit, at least temporarily, because they feel like, hey, a heads up would have been, appreciated. I think also that it's a situation where I don't there's such a fine line between wanting to keep something under wraps, which is so hard to do in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And as you said at the top, like, we were all really surprised. We'd heard the rumors, but even though we'd heard rumors, all of us were pretty sure by the end of the night, like, okay, he's not going to be here tonight. And then when the music hits, like, holy crap, he's there. To get to that moment, to have one of those moments, it is presupposes that you are not going to have a bunch of those conversations, even if it's politically dicey. And so I don't fault Triple H or Punk for not doing that, because it creates a nice moment for fans in an era when everything seems to get out ahead of time. They were able to do this.
Well, I'll let you go back to it. This is what I've got a thought about it, because that's the chief question I've been wondering about, and specifically about Seth. That is my chief thought. I've had a thought, and then I have a question, and the question is interesting because it's a question that I think could matter, but it really doesn't matter. Here's what I think. I think that Triple H, Nick Khan, maybe some of the Endeavor guys, TKO or whoever, I do think it was extremely close hold. And what I mean by that is exactly what Tom said, to Tom's point. In this day and age, the more people you tell, there's a guaranteed leak. There's a guaranteed leak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it was a very close hold. My thought, though, is that they had to tell Seth.
Yeah.
They had to. And the reason I think they had to tell Seth, and I don't think they asked, my question would have been a separate question, but my interesting thought was, did they ask Seth, hey, we're thinking about bringing him back. What do you think? I don't think they did that. I think they told Seth that he's coming back, and you need to be aware that he's coming back and the deal is done and he's going to come out here. I do think that my thought is they had to tell Seth, because I do believe that there is real challenges, like real personality heat, whatever you want to call it, real stuff going on between Seth Rollins and CM Punk in real life.
100% agree.
And if they didn't tell Seth, they were maybe not at the end of Survivor Series on camera, but there might have been a confrontation in the back. And so they had to tell him to avoid that scenario.
Yeah. The reason that it's legit with Seth is because he has made negative comments about CM Punk in interviews
when
there was nothing to be gained from it. It's just like there's no reason other than this is my honest opinion of this guy.
I never thought he's coming back. He's at another company. I fucking hate that guy.
Right.
Here's my question, and this is really interesting to me. Did they tell Roman?
Oh wow.
And this is what I wonder, because they know Roman better than anyone. Obviously, Roman's been in the company a long time. There is a part of me that says they're not going to tell Roman, and Roman's not going to care.
I think Roman wouldn't care, but yeah,
a part of Roman's personality to me, is that, you know what I mean? He's back. Does it affect? And this is real Roman, not like kayfabe, like real Joe or whoever's name. Does it affect my deal? No, it doesn't. What are we doing? This is the type of guy I am right now. I don't care if it doesn't directly impact me. However, I'm really, really interested, because here's, I think, to Tom's point, I think this is where the hurt feelings come in. The hurt feelings come in because there is a clear line of importance and stature in your company if you knew Seth was coming, if you knew CM Punk was coming back, or if you didn't. And so if Cody knows and Seth knows, because we know they're going to know. Does main event Jey Uso know? Does Drew McIntyre know? Does Roman know? And if you're looking at who's the important people in this company, and you say, hey, look, somebody called Paul Heyman, somebody called Roman, he knew this was going to happen. Cody knew, Seth knew. Well, if you're Walter, if you're Drew McIntyre, if you're Randy Orton and you didn't know, Does that make you less important? And this is wrestling. Everybody's jockeying for wherever they think they need to be. If they're a mid-carder, they want to be in the mid-card. If the mid-carders don't know, that's fine. But if you're Cody and you're Drew McIntyre and Cody knows and Drew doesn't, or something of that nature, I think that's where, in real life, that's where Triple H is going to get some phone calls and say, hey, man, like, I knew some people knew. I knew maybe it's a need-to-know basis, but this clearly makes you think you're either important or you're not important in WWE.
Here, let me give you this is the hypothetical phone call when they call Roman. I'm Roman. Here's the phone call. Hello? Raw or SmackDown? Raw? Okay. That's the conversation. I think that's his level of like, okay, do whatever you want. I'm not on the show.
Yeah, I've got Marvel on the other line. Got to go.
It's a legitimate question though. It's a legitimate. How important is Roman Reigns to WWE that he needs to know things like this is going to kind of shift the conversation?
I do think now that you bring it up, I think you're exactly right. I think that first of all, what's interesting about pro wrestling is how, pardon the pun, but how much diva behavior there is from a lot of these guys. And like the kind of thing that you're talking about is like, to us, we sort of understand it on an intellectual level why it might matter to somebody. But to some of those people, it is like extreme. They will take it like an extremely significant slight.
Yep.
It varies from person to person. I don't. For example, if Sami Zayn didn't know, I don't see him as the kind of guy who would like freak out about it.
Right.
But some of those other guys, like, I'm not sure. And I will say, having now heard you say all that, I would say I would bet they did give Roman a heads up, just from the standpoint of, hey, down the road, this could be a match that we want to do. And we want you to know that he's coming back. It's not going to be right away, but down the road it might be.
And
but I'm safe to say,
literally the most important person in this company.
I'm safe to say that Triple H wasn't soliciting opinions before offering him that.
Right. It's in my old job. We used to talk about this is, even if your input was requested in certain depending on what it was, the president would preface it by saying, this is not a whether conversation. This is a how conversation. And I think that all those conversations that Triple H was potentially having with people was more like, this is an FYI, down the road, we might, if you guys do something, we certainly will want to hear your input, but this is not we're not asking for your vote. We're not asking for your approval.
Here's the thing though. I think they told, this is what I think. I think they told Seth CM Punk was coming. I think it's more of a conversation. Not that Roman Reigns has the ability to veto it.
Yeah.
But it's much more of a conversation with Roman Reigns. And maybe you're able to share back and forth, and I'll tell you, basically there's no reasoning with Seth. I bet you there's probably some, let me explain to you, Roman, how this is going to impact us long term. Because again, I think Roman's gotten everything he wants, and I think he's extremely happy. And we assume based off of just the stuff that Roman has to do more non-kayfabe stuff than anybody else in WWE. He's on SportsCenter, and his interviews are like shoot interviews, like they're real kind of interviews, and then he'll snap back into character maybe, for a couple of lines in those interviews. But I do think you are clearly the most important person in this company. And I do think bringing in someone like CM Punk, whether it's true or not, and seeing what's happened over the last, say, 72, 48 hours since Survivor Series, record-breaking this and this and this, I think there's a conversation that says, hey, look, Roman, like, this is going to happen. This will happen. He's going to you are the most important person in this company. You know what I mean? Let's figure out how because again, otherwise, you get Phil coming in. If Phil's coming in thinking he's the most important person in this company, then you've got a real big problem.
I agree with everything you just said. And let me ask you guys both this question. So this conversation this part of the conversation is really interesting and has got me thinking. Put CM Punk to the side for 1 second because he just got there. I think we would all agree that in terms of the sort of internal, unofficial political pecking order as management sees it, Roman Reigns is number one.
Absolutely.
And I would argue pretty clearly that Cody is number two.
Absolutely.
Who's number three?
I think Seth.
Yeah, Seth, and then maybe Walter.
Gunther. I don't think Gunther's.
I don't think. No, it's not Gunther.
Gunther might be number 4 on the ratings chart. Internal, like it's but political influence, there may not be any.
Maybe. Well, we're slighting the women's division there.
I was going to say, I think
probably
it might be Becky.
Yeah, it's probably got to be a woman at 4. Because I agree. Roman, Cody, Seth, and then probably Becky
And the one who's I think is rising the fastest is Rhea Ripley.
Well, Rhea and and I think I do think Gunther is rising pretty high.
Yeah, I think
Rhea and Gunther. Yeah.
Let me pose this to you guys. Okay, Cheats, you're Triple H. Tom, you're Nick Khan. You have the notification meeting Saturday morning, maybe Friday night, maybe 6 days ago with Seth. Seth replies with, guys, there's one thing about his AEW and how toxic he is. I have spent the last 2 years bashing this guy up and down. I can do business, but not with a guy like that. If this is a done deal, man, and you don't think it's bad for business having this guy come in, I'm not going to show up Saturday night. I quit. What do you think?
Never would happen.
What? Okay, good. Seth is
a professional, man.
Seth is a professional. So
he's a professional, and his wife works for the company too.
So I'm saying, why is there really any concern that Seth's going to be anything other than that and not try?
I think if they didn't tell him there was concern, there could be a fight in the back. Really, like a real fight.
So you think Seth would not voice, give us some strident answer beforehand, but had he not been told, he would have put everything he has in that company at risk and done that?
Here's the thing. Had he not been told, you're at the end of Survivor Series, all of this stuff is going around, emotions galore. CM Punk could have walked past him and say, "Hey man, what's up?" And Seth could have punched him in the face. Like I think that was the fear of this whole thing.
So there's a little difference between Seth and CM Punk then, if he's that prone to confrontation.
My thing would be I don't think it's a high likelihood, but I think that you lose very little by preemptively diffusing the situation. So even if it's like you've got a time bomb and there's only a 10% or 5% chance the bomb's going to actually explode, but why not diffuse it if you have the opportunity to do it? I think that's the thinking.
I think you had to tell him.
Yeah.
I don't think you walk out there. I don't think you hit that music and walk out there blind.
What I would have been concerned about more so than and I think this also goes to the points that you guys are making. I wouldn't have been necessarily concerned about Seth Rollins is going to just attack Punk or Punk will attack Seth Rollins or whatever. What I would have been concerned about, and my primary motive, if I'm Nick Khan or Triple H, and my primary motivation for giving folks heads up. Oh, and by the way, somebody else who definitely knew was Randy Orton. My primary motivation would have been I don't want these guys who were just in the main event, especially Randy, who's come back after a year and a half, to feel like this is a big FU to them, and they've just been upstaged.
Yeah, there's
even though they kind of have.
Yeah.
So I would want to talk through that with at least certainly Randy, probably Cody and Seth as well, and then Seth, of course, for the additional reason that Cheatham has talked about, which is hey, you've been saying a lot of bad things about this dude. Just FYI, he's going to be your coworker very soon.
My thing is, we don't know these guys. In that sense, it could have been something as clear as CM Punk walking over and saying to Seth, "Hey man, I just want to bury the hatchet." And Seth could have easily been like, "F you," and then Phil hits him. We don't know. You know what I mean? It's that tenuous.
I heard today, as a matter of fact, that apparently that conversation did happen between CM Punk and The Miz.
Oh, I hadn't heard it. I mean,
that they buried the hatchet because obviously Punk had made some pretty inflammatory
Absolutely.
comments that I can't repeat here.
Miz had been mentioned in Punk's promos in AEW. That MJF was
that's right. A couple of times. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's just, and again, I also do think that we're operating on a baseline of like rational human beings that are not professional wrestlers.
Yeah.
I mean, and so when I say that,
yes.
exactly. Because when I say that, there's these things that happen in that world with those athletes that makes you snap back and realize like these guys, to do the job that they do, I don't know, 340 days out of 360, there's the potential for them to, it may not be the dark side of wrestling days. It may not be, the 80s or 90s and that type, but these guys still have some things going on. Like, there's still a handful of them that probably take too many pills, drink too much. Like, there's still some things going on, which I do think,
What's really interesting about that, and I've actually thought about this quite a bit.
It could be potential.
I think that the things that the sort of dark side of the ring horror story type stuff, there's I'm sure it exists in pockets.
Sure.
People are people, just like in the not real life, that's a wrong term, but outside the wrestling world, there are people who have those demons as well. But I do think it's the culture of the business, I don't think is so inexorably tied to those activities the way that it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Completely changed.
But one thing that is, I think, similar, not to 40 years ago in wrestling, but just to something that is more prevalent in, I think, workplaces around in every sector now, is that I think that there is more, what's the right word here? I think that in this respect, a lot of the sort of, I don't want to call it paranoia, but sort of getting up in your own head and like mental health stuff, I think that happens at a lot of workplaces more commonly now, especially with younger people. I think, again, wrestling, they're just people. I think that they deal more with that stuff today than you would have seen, 30, 40 years ago, when maybe the sort of reaction to that stuff would have been just to bury their sorrows at the bottom of a bottle.
Sure.
And I think, so the reason why that's relevant to what we're talking about now is I think that all the stuff that we just talked about with the sort of sensitivities around this guy coming into the company who is such a divisive person, that's something that I think nowadays there would be more awareness and more, I think management would see more of a need to have those conversations and address that with their employees, or certain employees anyway, than would have been perceived, 30 years ago or even 10 years ago with Vince McMahon. I think Vince would have just been like, three people are going to know about this, and consequences be damned. We're just going to, it's good for business, it's good TV, and we'll just see what happens. In fact, an example of that, very different mentality and sort of an older generation, was famously when Jim Ross got drafted to SmackDown, he found out about it live on TV for the first time. And like, that is something that now seems crazy for a number of reasons, but that's just,
the example, really quickly, the example you use is a great example of what you're talking about. Do you think 15 years ago, anybody would have cared about The Miz? Like, and I'm not saying The Miz as a wrestler. I'm saying the position where Miz is in the company. Do you think anyone would have had a sensitivity about how this, potential mid-carder is feeling about a situation that the executives are making?
Completely.
The only way they would have considered that is if The Miz or the analog to The Miz was like a legit badass in real life, and they're like, we got to talk to this guy because if he's
nuts, right? But I think that's exactly to your point, because I think I did read the same thing that you did. Yeah, someone had to go and smooth it over with The Miz just for a mental state, not a, you know what I mean? Not like,
there's a lot more mutual respect now than there used to be, and I hate always trying to. I'm not bringing this back necessarily to Vince McMahon, the person, but we're just talking about how indicative, like, the business, the backstage culture has changed from 10, 15 years ago, where there was one singular guy making the decisions with seemingly very little regard to how it affected anybody else. And that, as much, I mean, there's undoubtedly, it's okay to label Punk a hypocrite for a lot of those reasons, but Punk probably knows that culture is different, has seen that culture is different, and from conversations with Triple H realized that the company that I left 9 years ago, the circumstances, the people's, the attitudes, that's not that company anymore, which makes it a little more easy to reconcile with yourself, if you're having these conversations about how, everything I said, I mean, I can't believe I'm going back to this place that got me sick. It's for, like, all those reasons we just talked about, that Vince McMahon was in charge of all that. And it's just not the company it was 9 years ago. So I just think this time around, right. Punk seems like someone who cares very much about, believe it or not, workers' rights. And that's what got him in trouble originally. I think
Punk cares about himself.
I don't think any more than any other wrestler. What do you?
No, I think more.
Why?
Because otherwise he wouldn't be back. So this is a good question. This is a really quick question for you.
He didn't just walk in the door. He was invited back.
No, all right. We'll see. This is the question I have. TG said he thinks his primary reason for coming back is to stick it to AEW. I said my primary reason I think he's coming back is because he can't help himself, more of a egotistical narcissist. What do you think Punk's primary reason for coming back to WWE is?
I think it's somewhere in the middle of those 2 points. I think undoubtedly he wants to somehow stick it to AEW. Now, it's interesting, everyone was sort of waiting for, how he was going to subtly torch the Young Bucks, subtly torch Nick Khan, subtly torch AEW as a company in his promo last night. What he did do, he no-sold AEW completely, which in a lot of ways is the best way to bury somebody. So, him and Triple H very well may have a plan. But I think also, like any other professional wrestler supporter or fan or talent, he still wants to be a wrestler. He still wants to get that crowd reaction. He wants to maybe wash a little bit of the stink of AEW off of him. There's only one, even though he may realize I'm just as, I always like to assume positive intent and think that Cheats looking at me like, why would you assume positive intent?
With CM Punk?
I've never played. I've always put less of the AEW blame on him than y'all have. I think there was a lot of circumstances that he was subjected to that he shouldn't have been. He reacted very poorly. But between the way leadership is run, it seems to be run there, the way the leader seems to run things there, that went south really bad. And I think, again, remember, he doesn't just march back, doesn't just let WWE know I'm coming back on Saturday. They could have legit said no. Triple H wanted him back at the end of the day. Triple H / Nick Khan wanted him back. And I'm far more focused on the reasons they want him back and what their plan is for than whether or not, the WWE is run so much different than AEW. It would appear that, like, Punk knows that having that kind of attitude now, the way is not going to work. So, like, I think Punk's a smart enough guy to know I can't do that stuff here because it's not going to work out. I give Punk, despite a lot of the ego and issues he has, definitely more credit than you do, because I just saw a different circumstance in AEW than y'all did at the end of the day. But I think it's going to work out great, and I see Punk as being a much better soldier, possibly for those reasons Tom's mentioning, that, like, this is the best way to no sell it, to never mention it, but in every way, not only, and also Triple H could somehow be sending a message by taking Punk back in, by giving him and especially if Punk acts the right way, it's also a message to potential free agents in AEW that, this is where, you can be. So, if that's the plan, damn, show me a scenario where that doesn't work. I love AEW. I want it to succeed. I don't want it to go away, but this is a huge, huge move, and I see less downside that y'all do about it. I could be wrong. I was wrong before.
I think the downside part, again, it's from WWE's perspective. So first of all, let me just say this. I think that
if Nick and Triple H didn't think they could control him, they would not have taken this risk.
See, I don't think you're wrong about that. But my point is, even if it winds up being the case that he flames out in a year, if they get a TV deal that is enhanced because of Punk and blocks AEW, it's like done. Everything else is gravy. If he sticks around and he's, a good soldier and all that, that's great. But we got what we needed from this. It's a win, period. It's a win. So I think that's probably the thinking there. Again, this is based on my theory where the interests are aligned among those parties because they all are like, this is not only going to help from Punk's perspective, yes, it's going to line his pockets, but he could have lined his pockets in Impact, as you guys talked about. There's that element of it. But to Cheatham's point, it's the biggest platform there is, and it really is going to put the screws to AEW potentially in multiple ways. And of course, from Triple H and especially I think Nick Khan's perspective, this is like business-wise with the TV deal looming. This is a big thing. I think in hindsight, if things do go badly for AEW, hypothetically, over the next year, I think they are going to look back and their biggest regret is going to be, we should have gotten the TV deal finalized before we let Punk officially go.
Yep.
We should have had, suspend him, whatever, but, actually letting him walk out the door and show up on WWE TV before we had our renewal or new TV deal, major mistake. So one thing I wanted to address that you had said, Elliot, that I think is right, and it's something that I was saying over the weekend, is there is a scenario where for all of the sort of negative things that I think or Cheatham thinks or whatever about the way CM Punk has behaved, both at the end of his last WWE stint and also during his AEW stint, there is a scenario where CM Punk, either on his own or because he is persuaded that this is the way to go, that he is like, okay, what would be the ultimate revenge, so to speak, against AEW? It would be to be a model employee at WWE, because then it's like, oh, it was definitely AEW's fault that all fell apart, because look how great I've been in WWE. It's not me, guys. I wasn't the problem. It was them. And P.S., they're going to be out of business in 6 months. So that is one way that this could go.
In the little time remaining we have here, I just want to toss out a couple of question scenarios for just sort of quick answers as to what maybe the future holds. First of all, Punk mentioned in his promo how he was, welcome back, loved backstage. There was a report today that Punk tried to see as many people as possible, but he mentioned in his promo he was kissed on the mouth. Who kissed him on the mouth? What's your guesses? Give me one guy, one girl that kissed Punk on the mouth last night. I'm going to say
Kevin Owens.
Kevin, okay.
Except he wasn't at Raw.
I'm going to say Kofi kissed him on the mouth.
Oh,
happy to see him back, and probably Natalya. Those are my guesses. Definitely vets. Definitely people who have been there a long time who miss Punk. Who do you think he was referring to when he said Punk got kissed on the mouth? No clue.
Damn it,
not important to you.
That.
You didn't hear him say he was backstage hugging and kissing people?
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay,
I sort of blacked out after he said I'm home. I was just like, I cannot put the balls on that guy.
This is where I've
always belonged here. Everybody, hey,
belonged here. Well, yeah. Okay. Last question. Creatively, one would sort of assume Punk and Rollins are going to dance around and towards each other to a clash.
Yeah.
Would you rather see it wait to WrestleMania, or do you think they hot shot it to Royal Rumble? Prediction time.
I mean, the way I would book it is, I think you go straight for Punk and Roman. I know that's not what they're going to do because he has to stay on Raw, but simply because you still have until next WrestleMania, you still have 5 months, and Roman has virtually literally beaten every potential opponent that is on the roster, especially every potential opponent who has credibility, with the exception of Solo Sikoa, and CM Punk. And CM Punk,
did he beat Gunther? Roman beat Gunther?
No, but Gunther's sort of siloed in Raw too.
Right. He's sort of in a pocket sort of dimension with the IC title until Brock comes back, and then they will wrestle at WrestleMania, which will be awesome. But so I guess I would love to see that play out, but realistically, it's Seth. And I would say, gosh, good question. Royal Rumble or WrestleMania? Save it for WrestleMania.
Yeah, I think you save it for main event night 1 WrestleMania. I don't think it has to be for the title necessarily. Cheats, what do you think?
No, I think it's definitely WrestleMania. I'm actually going back. So who do we think? Do we think Cody is Roman's WrestleMania opponent?
For sure.
Yeah, unless by some miracle, Dwayne gets back in the picture. It's Cody.
So you think it's Cody, Roman, and then you think it's Seth, CM Punk, WrestleMania.
Yeah,
that's not night.
And then
one,
you think it's Gunther
events.
Brock. You think it's Gunther Brock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where does main event Jey Uso fall into this?
I think he wrestles Jimmy.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think you wait till WrestleMania. I think you build it up. I try to have him dance around for a bit. My question is, do you just not let CM Punk wrestle until WrestleMania? That's what I would do. What was that, 5 months? That's the same thing they did. That's the same thing they did for the late Bray Wyatt. Let's just make that.
I have to say, at watching that Punk promo and then thinking about his debut Saturday night, I did start thinking about Bray Wyatt. Obviously, completely different presentation, completely different character. But the idea that is he just going to come out and do monologues? Or
I don't need him. I don't need him to wrestle. I don't need him to wrestle.
Yeah,
I've seen him wrestle enough for the last year.
I think the history and the build-up, like most of what we talked about with Seth last night, those two are going to have an epic clash at WrestleMania. You can really spend the next few months building towards that. I think so much so that you don't necessarily have to have the title on the line for that. I just personally don't think it's very realistic to see Punk winning the world championship. They did it in AEW. I don't think they need to do that in that scenario. I think Punk will cost. They still need to figure out what to do with Damian Priest and Money in the Bank. Yeah. I do not believe Priest is worthy of having the kind of cash in at WrestleMania that Punk had that Rollins had a couple of years ago. So you need to sort of figure out. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can have the Judgment Day turn on Priest and cost him the Money in the Bank title. I don't see Priest though as a babyface right now. I almost see Finn or Rhea be more of a babyface at some point. But that aside, I think it's possible without wrestling that Punk costs Rollins a cash in. I guess maybe it's Survivor Series, although I would not want Priest's reign to be that long. You could theoretically have Priest in a world title match against somebody at WrestleMania and have it not be the main event because you have Punk and Rollins.
I think Priest is going to wrestle Finn Balor at WrestleMania in some scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that the world title does not have to be the main event if you've got Punk and Rollins?
I agree with that.
So you could really have you could have a main event Punk and Rollins without the world title being on the line. Yeah, I think
my thought, and it might be too late to do it now, but my thought was they would have, whenever Gunther eventually loses the Intercontinental title, that he would be the guy who then wins the world title, whether it's from Priest or from Rollins. But of course, now you got Punk in the mix, that complicates things. And then Brock, if he'd won the title by WrestleMania, it'd be him and Brock for the world title. Gunther would win.
Do you think Brock's gonna come back at Royal Rumble?
Yes. I think he's going to eliminate Gunther from the Royal Rumble, and that's going to be that'll kick off their feud to return the favor from last year. But here's a question for both of you guys. It seems like we're all in agreement that the most likely WrestleMania match is Punk versus Rollins. Question: who's the heel and who's the face? If I'm booking it, you know how it's going to go.
You think Punk's the heel?
Yeah, I would make him a sort of a smarmy, take his natural personality, turn up to 11, and he's a better heel than he is.
Punk is a better heel. He's a face. Rollins has been acting heelish in the last few days, but
yeah, I don't like this version of Rollins, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah, who knows? I guess you'd want to see, is who is going to be still loved more as a heel, Rollins or Punk? That's a good question. And I think that can, they might need to sort of test that over the next several weeks.
I think they will, but I also think that it's gonna come back pretty quickly. And what I mean by that, I don't know if you guys saw this, there was a clip that's going around the internet now that actually shows the crowd reaction to Punk in Louisville, where they were last night. And it's vastly, was it last night? Are they in Louisville? Were they in Louisville? Nashville. It's vastly different than it was in Chicago.
Yeah. Same thing same thing happened.
Absolutely. I was about to get to that. Yeah. You're exactly right. And it's the same thing that happened with quite a few of the characters following kind of the first CM Punk battle, right? There's they even made it a whole thing on the AEW behind the scenes show, was how differently the Bucks were received in places that were kind of quote unquote Buck friendly than to not. And right. CM Punk was basically well received in Chicago and nowhere else. And so I think it will be an easier transition than we think, making Punk a heel, because they were kind of
corporate Punk.
They were kind of flat.
That would be. I would love that.
Yeah,
so much. It would be so great.
It was a very stark difference from him, like just the crowd reaction to him coming outside of Chicago.
And I think you're right. And I want to make it clear, I agree with everything you just said. I think it's easier to make him a heel. I think the reaction is going to be different once sort of the initial, like, oh my gosh, Punk is back, has worn off, and they're in cities farther away from Chicago. I think it's going to be different. I will say one thing, just to play devil's advocate a little bit. When Cody went to WWE, I was like, this is going to fade, because, he was getting such weak reactions in AEW over the last year he was there, and he was sort of this insistent baby face, and the crowd was just like, we're not interested in this. And then he went to WWE, and it was like, he's for sure the most over face over the last year and a half of anybody in that company. And it's like, it's so consistent. It's every town. It's everybody loves him. I'm not saying Punk is in the same position, but what I'm saying is I acknowledge the fact that went in a direction that I was not expecting. And it's also possible that the same thing could happen with Punk, that maybe people will be into, I don't know, a more traditional sort of positive, if this is the way they want to go, traditional positive Punk who's like, look, I'm back for you guys. I really came back for the fans, whatever, even if I'm sitting in film like Elliot, like, oh my,
it's hard to even sit to hear it. Yeah, it's right. It's going to be awesome. The wrestling world's a buzz again. Biggest WWE moment for me since Bray's return, honestly.
Biggest moment since CM Punk came back the last time.
That was one of the funny things in watching like the reaction videos and the ones that they showed in Raw. I was like, these same people were doing the same stuff like 2 years ago for this guy. It's interesting.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
We're going to be here consistently on Tuesdays over the next several weeks, hopefully to just continue discussing this, because, week to week now, Raw certainly became a lot more must-see than it had been over the last several weeks.
Definitely interested in the numbers about what Raw did.
Because of ratings. hopefully this Thursday, Cheats, we're going to have an AEW show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about CM Punk from the AEW angle.
Yeah, yep. Well, I talk about there
Thursday, so it'll be a lot more CM Punk talk.
John
I will also like
John
to say,
Moxley was interviewed yesterday.
Tony Khan was interviewed, so there's a lot on the AEW side.
We'll talk about it all Thursday, I guess. Chief,
I'll
what you got?
also
Final
like
thoughts?
to say my final thought is T.O. played in the Super Bowl with a broken leg, and it still only took him, a couple games in the next season to divide the locker room and shut the Eagles down. So my point is, CM Punk to me is very much, and I'm trying to be. This is me being as optimistic as possible. Like I'm trying to. I watched.
Not very optimistic.
No, I watched Raw last night. I mean, I'm trying to figure out from a wrestling standpoint, storyline standpoint. I can't help to think that this is Terrell Owens, this is Kyrie Irving, this is James Harden figuring out a way to sabotage this thing from the inside.
Well, we'll see, and it'll all be awesome. Quick shout out to all of our friends who support us. Kelsey, Megan, we miss you. Wrestling Purist Podcast, Flobo, all of our friends out there. Find us on social media at WCWF Pod on X. Wrestling Chat with Friends, the group on Facebook and on YouTube. Subscribe, like, comment. We're going to talk a lot of CM Punk in the next few weeks, whether you like it or not, because Roman's not around and it's the hottest thing in town. So, for Cheats, for someone who's not a hypocrite, TG, we will see you on Thursday, and we'll be back here next Tuesday talking WWE at Wrestling Chat with Friends. Ring that bell. We're out of here. Done. Tapping out.